content of this channel is for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification button. And please, feel free to share the video. Thank you.
Yo, what's good, everybody? I'm GG. You tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. It's the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up with no chasers. Straight up. Before I get things started, man, I want to give a shout out to all the haters out there. I know y'all lurking. How you doing? How you doing? If you haven't already done so, man, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe button, and the bell notification button so you can stay on top of here. Stay on top of what's cracking here on the Green Gorilla channel. And, like I always do, I want to make sure I give a shout out to all the members of the Green Gorilla channel. But right now, I want to give an extra special shout out to my brother, Barry Little, for his support. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. And also, I want to give a shout out to Jay Cleveland Green. Hold me down in the chat. Big up to those brothers right there. And I would like to proceed with the roll call, man, so I can get that out of the way and then get to the show, man. So big up to Afro Truth TV, Show Me Brotherly Love, Jay Cleveland Green, Rice Morgis, Spain Man, Lee Ways, Tahuti of New Comet, No Sleep, and Ben Cannon Kenton. Big up to y'all. Big up to 7th Coast Docho, Apex Prowler, Anthony Davis, I'm Just Jules, Black Swerve 404, An Honest Look, Sherlin Woe, Ricky Dawson, Stefan, Julius Ferguson, and Lord Hamal. Big up. Big up to Truth 7360, Mr. Me Too, Call for President, Leading from the Back, Gold Professor, AKs and Curtains, H-Town, Roguish the Bill Monger, BD Main, Adrian Thomas, and Electrician 480. I see you out there. Big up. Big up to Bingo, Cutting Up with the Jones, Zanko, D. Scott, Path, God, Pete Rock, Aaron Peters, Marnolis, Dar, Vincent Lindsay, and Beautiful Trauma. Big up. Big up the Quiz, the Poet, Black Wizard, Jazz Tech, Shadow Observer, Sugar T, Artisan MC, Kyle J. Sura, Kareem, Troy Warren, and Mrs. K.P. Bailey, and Alan Wiley. I see you out there, Mrs. K.P. Bailey. Big up. Big up to The Face, Life of Commerce, Dreamlit, A. Wilson's Ghost, Timothy Blewett, Jeffrey Speed, Marvin Battle, Mark Holt, Adam, and BGS Ibmore. Big up. Big up to Ignatz Mouse, Brian Peaks, Papa Didas, Scott Haywood, Black Uru, Dr. Tree, Leroy Honeycutt, Supertech, 77 Base X, Brian McMurray, and K-Ron S. Big up. Big up to Charles Rogers, Rick Ross, Sandra Jean, Charles Gilmore, Greg, Barry Little, Mr. Valentino, Jason Hales, Black Men Being Brutally Honest, Karen 87, Doc LaRock. Also, Mark Swift, Odd Collar, Donna Watts, Coach Hotep, Old Soul Chief, Mr. Blue Collar, TD Hip Hop Media, Drew Main, Mr. Heat, Sir Anthony, MLR, Universal 178, and Rasheed Barnes. Big up. Also, I want to give a shout out to Aaron Smith, DH, Red Pill Revelator, Aaron Infinite, Dr. Tiasan Johnson, Kalonja Kala, Hostile Adept, and WPR1. Big up. And also, I can't forget my brothers in heaven, Forrest Windu, David Carroll, and Kevin Samuels. Big up to all of those individuals. Also, I'd like to give a shout out on the Patreon side to Chris Flowers, Christopher Burton, Dax, BJ Live, Rashawn Phillips, Keith Bass, Nick Rock 1, Albert C, Dr. Ben Vincent, Jay Cleveland Green, I'm the Light of My Father, Waffle Weave, Tyrone Hampton, Dornell Smith, Excalibur, Anu 219, Pursuer Prisoner, Taz, Dragon 59, Jay Bailey, Mr. Michi Momal, and Asangwa. Big up to all of y'all. Y'all deserve a round of applause, and thank you so much for supporting the Green Gorilla channel. I appreciate that. From the bottom of my heart, I do indeed appreciate it. And if you're looking to find a means by which you also can support the Green Gorilla channel, here's how you do it, man.
What's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel, the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, no chaser.
Today I want to introduce you to my new membership program that consists of 5 levels where you can invest in the Green Gorilla channel on a monthly basis and receive level-specific perks. Memberships are special because they improve the quality of the content of the channel and will help me to be able to keep the channel going. Now, to participate in the Green Gorilla channel membership program, all you have to do is hit the join button, which is located right next to the subscribe button on my channel page. Now, for all of my subscribers who decide not to participate in my membership program, nothing will change. The content will keep coming the way it always has. Thanks for watching, and be careful out here, people. Bless.
Which doll is the black doll? And which one is the white doll?
That one.
Which doll is the pretty doll? Which doll is the nice doll? Which doll is the bad doll? Which doll is the nice doll? And which doll is the bad doll? And why is that doll pretty?
Because she's white and he has 2 eyes.
Which doll is the ugly doll? Why is that doll ugly?
Because he's black.
Which doll looks most like you?
Like me.
Yeah, which one looks like you?
And that one,
Okay.
that doll.
Yeah, I started off with that, you know what I mean? I had to start off with that because what people don't understand is, man, a lot of our issues and problems in the black community, man, it stems back to just that, the dial test. You might not like it, but it is what it is. You see it. It's observable. This experiment has been performed for the past 60 years. It was one of the means by which that during the civil rights movement, it was proved that separate but equal facilities were debilitating psychologically for black boys and girls. And that, you know, we needed to do away with segregation. I mean, that was one of the ways that Kenneth Clark demonstrated that segregation was immoral and it was incapacitating to the psyche, okay? But I mean, you know, if this is how you come up, this is the mentality that you have, and this is not something that is based upon reflection. This is not something that is predicated upon you studying and researching and using your waking faculties to determine. This is something that you're born into. Most black people hate each other, bro. It's the facts. And why do we hate each other? Because to be quite frank, we hate ourselves. We hate ourselves. It is what it is. If you hate yourself, if you think that your kind is ontologically, culturally, morally inferior, not because you think it, you're walking around rationalizing that, but if that's part of your unconscious makeup, your subconscious makeup, if that's how you walk around, hating, I can't stand these niggas is this, these niggas is that. hate these niggas. I see niggas and flies I despise. The more I see niggas, the more I like flies. I can't stand these niggas. And the problem is, it's unfortunate, but that's how we're socialized. We're socialized in that manner, man. I've heard my own family members say things that are deprecating to other black people, whether it be how dark they are or what their facial features are like or what their cultural predicament is. I've heard all of this. But if you don't even love yourself, how can you even love your family? Or beyond that, your community? How can you love them if you don't love yourself? If you don't love yourself, if you don't love yourself, and we're not talking about narcissism, because that's false love. That's not a deep-seated and a true love of self. That's a false love of self. I'm talking about a deep-seated, substantive respect for your potential and a respect for your capacity, a respect for your impact, a respect for others that extends beyond and past yourself, the ability to communicate and to coordinate with others, the ability to resolve conflict, the ability to create positivity, the ability to instill within others not a contempt for others that are around them, but a rejoicing and a resounding extent of a feeling of gregariousness and happiness and joyousness to the people that you're around. Not only in your family, but in your immediate surroundings. We don't have that. We don't have it. We come out of the suckled stages thinking that we're inferior, defective, we're inherently bad, we're ugly. So how is it that we're going to treat each other? Some people say, and this is why, right, at the current moment, I'm just unhappy with the quality of so-called leaders in the black community at the present moment. And it's not because I think that they're unintelligent. I just think they're focused on the wrong thing. Like everybody is focused on diversity. Diversity this, diversity that, representation this, representation that. What's the point of representation? If the people who are in the slots that are being represented don't even love themselves, what's the point of the representation? And shout out to, hold on, I gotta take care of this, man. Gotta take care of Mr. Heat, man. He going ham, bro. Shout out to Mr. Heat, man. Real talk, man. Before I even move forward, I gotta give him some fanfare. Shout out to Mr. Heat. Thank you so much for your support, man. It is duly noted, sir. And if you can, man, please support the Green Gorilla channel, man. I come on here today. One of the things that I was going to do is talk about passport bros, but I decided this issue here is more important. It's more important because this is what's happening here and it hits close to home. We have a situation in which 5 black police officers murdered a black male, 29 years old, a young man, a young black man, over a fucking traffic violation. Now, I'm pretty sure that the situation escalated well beyond a traffic violation, okay? Okay, we get it. We understand. Some other things took place. But goddamn, man. Like, how did it escalate to the point where it's time to beat this motherfucker worse than Rodney King was beaten by police in LA, who we know have a long, deep-seated history of murdering and killing black folks. But we end up doing it to ourselves. And Samada 66, you are exactly right, sir. They followed their programming. They followed their programming. You know, right now I'm talking to Sandog, you know, he's hitting me up on Facebook or whatnot. And, you know, he's like, well, what are the circumstances? Because I know some facts about the case that to me are absolutely reprehensible related to the individuals who engaged in these actions. It's unconscionable that these guys would do this. They're supposed to know better. One of the individuals that I would really actually like to talk to at this time, but I have not communicated with him, but I really would like to have a conversation with him or make him a part of this conversation, is Officer Charles Faulkner. But I don't want to put him on the spot at all, because I believe that this guy has a lot more restraint and a lot more self-love than a lot of other guys, you know, in police forces all throughout the United States. At least he has some capacity to think in relation to unity and togetherness and fraternity with other black men that he comes into contact with, which is sad to say. A lot of guys just that are black in general, they just don't have that. They don't care what the hell happens to Negroes. And I remember him saying yesterday on this very channel, he said, hey, look, man, you don't get to decide what army you got. You don't get a choice. You got to use the one that you're given. You don't get another group of people that you can think of ideologically inside of your head, how they ought to be, what they should look like, what kind of cultural values they should have, what kind of resources they should have, what kind of education they should have. You have what you have. And you can't change it. So you have to work with what you've got. It's like being allotted a body from your parents or from God or however you perceive or characterize it. You have to work with what you have. Now, you can modify it to some degree with contemporary science or medical science and stuff like that. But, I mean, for the most part, what you have is what you got. You got to work with what you have. Shout out to David Caldwell. He says, out of the darkness shall you rise upward, one with the light and one with the stars. Thoth. Gigi is the star within this space, showing brothers the path towards enlightenment. Keep doing what you do, sir. Thank you so much for that, man. I appreciate you for that, brother. Appreciate it. But I was talking to one of my frat brothers, man, earlier today. And, you know, one of the things that I made in reference as a comment to him was that, you know, you can put a black person in a slot that has been traditionally held by a white person, but that doesn't mean that that black person innately or automatically is going to do some sort of liberatory or emancipatory work by having that position. That's just not how it works. I even said it on this show the other day. You can take, like, say, for example, a nation that has been colonized. You can remove the white folks from the colony and put black people in the spaces that were traditionally reserved for white folks. You can put black people in there, and they will preserve the colonial processes They will preserve them. They won't just reverse them and utilize the institutions to work to everyone's advantage. It doesn't work like that. And it doesn't work like that with the police force either. It doesn't work like that. That's not how the game goes. So today I was about to curse out, women and go on a rant and a rave and all of that, but I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to talk about this. But I always talk about things from a factual or an academic perspective, a scholarly position to some degree. To some degree, okay? But we already know that today there's going to be a release of the video. But as a black individual, what do you say now? What do you say now? What is your argument now? Like, how do you respond and react now? Now you got 5 black men. 5. 5 black men who are responsible for deleting this brother here, man. You see him. He died about 17 days ago. No, 7 days. Yeah, 17 days ago. After sustaining injuries, doing an arrest in Memphis. This is an undated picture of this young guy. Doesn't look threatening to me. He doesn't look like Pookie to me. He looks like, a stoner guy or something like that. Like, like a black hippie of sorts. Doesn't look like Pookie to me. Doesn't have face tats if he's got gauges in his ear. But that's a different type of black guy than the gold tooth, face, neck tat. He says could be queer. Could be. But the police chief, her name is Sarah Lynn Davis, says she expects a strong reaction to the body cam footage that was taken on January 7th and the beating of Tyre Nichols, who died 3 days later. The police department is preparing to release the video today. And she says the incident was heinous, it was reckless, and inhumane. And in the vein of transparency, when the video is released in the coming days, you will see this for yourselves. So everybody's waiting right now for some black male death porn. Because that's what we do. We love to spectate the black male corpse. So we're going to see, footage of a black man being beaten, but this time not by white hulking police officers, but black ones. She says, I expect you to feel what the Nichols family feels. I expect you to feel outrage in the disregard of basic human rights, as our police officers have taken an oath to do the opposite of what transpired on the video. Nicholas, a 29-year-old black man, was stopped by the police at a traffic stop and was beaten by officers for 3 minutes. 3 minutes, bro. Just imagine being beat up for 3 minutes, bro. That's a whole round of boxing, bro. But you ain't just getting hit with fists. You're getting hit with like billy clubs and shit. Now, I don't know anything about affairs or anything like this. I haven't heard any of that. I haven't heard of that. But if that is the case, that is the biggest sucker shit in the world. If that's the case, that's the biggest sucker shit in the world. So I'm not gonna, I guess I will watch the film or whatever. I'll watch the footage in order to give an account of it to you all. But I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna show it. I'm not gonna put that out there for people to see. I'm not doing it. I'm not putting it out there, bro. But the reality is, man, again, if we don't love ourselves, how we gonna love the people that look like us as we walk around the streets, as we go to our jobs, as we, go to school? If we don't love ourselves, look, I'm gonna show you one more time, man. How the average black perceives themselves.
Which doll is the black doll? And which one is the white doll?
That one.
Which doll is the pretty doll? Which doll is the nice doll? Which doll is the bad doll? Which doll is the nice doll? And which doll is the bad doll? And
so I ain't gonna keep showing it, but every now and then, intermittently, I might show it. This is how the average black person is enculturated. They believe they're ugly, bad, and uncivilized. This is what you believe about yourself. So if you ask me, do black people have the same biases as white folks? Absolutely. Yes, sir. Yes, they do. It's a lot of Clayton Bigsby's rocking around here. But y'all don't want to hear that shit. Y'all don't like to hear that. You don't want to hear that. That makes you uncomfortable. You don't like to hear that. You don't want to hear that. I just downloaded this shit today. It's written in the Harvard Law Review. It's entitled The Black Police Policing Our Own. Okay? And it's a review, a book review. But it serves as a perfect springboard for the issues that black people face, not only in policing, but in other institutions and other departments of governance as well. Now, if you want a bunch of yelling today, a bunch of hooping and hollering over dumb shit, you're not gonna get it. I was gonna hoop and holler today over some passport shit, but to me, this is more important. This is deeper. Because when we talk about police violence, even as this article is putting it forth, right? It's been like out in the open. A nationwide discussion related to race comes about when we talk about how black people are, experiencing violence from the police. And then, which begs the question, are black lives actually mattered? Something that matters, okay? Now, let's detract away from the whole sloganeering and the entire movement called BLM and just focus with, the matter at hand. Do black people have the same moral value and worth as citizens as they walk around the United States. Let's frame it in that way. So you had a whole bunch of uprisings and rebellions, or you could say riots, however you want to characterize it, related to black men being visually murdered. Like you can see the recounts of these events. Shout out to Distinguished Legacy. He says, ask the right questions and the Clayton Bigsby will come right out of them. Facts. Shout out to Distinguished Legacy. Shout out to that brother. But I have some things outlined in this text, right? And this is important, man. This is not no bullshit, right? Separate from whether racialized policing against African Americans is, in fact, a social phenomenon, is the contestable question about, like, solutions. What is the way to solve, like, the so-called problem that black people have with the police? Some say, well, let's get more black police. Surely that would solve the issue, right? So, assuming that African Americans are indeed the victims of over-policing, meaning that they end up having more interactions with the police and more violent encounters than is perhaps warranted, what can we do about it, right? So there's a bunch of views ranging from let's get rid of the police, let's, ban the police. You remember that little slogan that came out? Let's defund the police. Let's train the police. Let's diversify police departments. And so this basically, this paper is about the last of these things, like let's diversify the police. And the central question they say, or they ask is, what are the dynamics that might shape how African American police officers police other Americans? What shapes how African American police officers police other African Americans? In another way, asking this question, what do existing theories about race and race relations and historical and empirical studies on race and policing suggest about how will we police our own? How will we police our own? What is it that we'll do? And so what they do in this article is they study a professor by the name of James Foreman, his work, a book called Locking Up Our Own. And it's about diversity. They say, okay, now Foreman might have formulated this book on different terms, but he says, the author of this piece, that it allows them to explore the relationship between diversity and being in positions of governance. Diversity and authority, diversity and the police, diversity and being a judge, diversity and being a social worker, diversity and being a teacher, diversity and being, you name it, the president of the United States. How will your so-called diversity play a hand in how you treat your own community? So Foreman's book is basically about how, what role do African Americans play across different sites of governance as mayors, governors, prosecutors, police officers, because we know in a large amount of instances, some people who look like us can be just as harsh and more cruel than white people ever have been. These are the facts. Whether you like it or not. There were some slave drivers that were black. Well, if you try to escape, they'll chase you just like Massa would. Chase your ass just like Massa would. So ultimately what Foreman's book, so James Foreman's book is called Locking Up Our Own. That much should be clear. I've not read this book, but this is a book review of that book in order to discuss what happens when we police our own, what kind of attitudes prevail among the members of the force when we police ourselves, what's going on there. And, you know, you have to admit that part of the predicament that black people find themselves in as it pertains to the law and incarceration, the drug war, part of it, we're responsible for ourselves. It should be clear because we have leaders, African-American leaders, who contributed and participated in the war on drugs. But, you know, it's not telling the whole story because one could argue that they argued for more than just incarceration. They also wanted other kinds of programs. They wanted to extend beyond just criminal justice or law enforcement-based solutions to the problems that were facing the black community. They wanted to do more than just have a law and order approach. Okay? One could argue. But, you know, dealing with triage, they felt like they had to hurry up and rush and just use the law and order approach in order to clean it up immediately, as if like there was a bullet wound, you know, like a triage right there. Okay, so they had to do something, they felt. But I mean, suffice it to say, black people have been agents, not just victims of mass incarceration. We did this. We promoted this, okay? But I think what the book, in this book review, is pointing out is not just attitudes and feelings that create racism or the conditions that hold black folks down. This power and structure and institutions. It's bigger than just feelings. It's systems, institutions, unconscious bias. It's not just I consciously hate your ass, and so therefore these are the things that happen. We're dealing with a system that creates certain outcomes or that generates certain kinds of outcomes. And so ultimately, what the authors of this book review try to demonstrate is that when African Americans are in positions of power, it doesn't eliminate racial barriers to combating racial inequality. That should be understood. And they go on to say if the two-term presidency of Barack Obama teaches us anything, it's that the racial identity of a leader, even the president of the U.S., is not enough to dismantle or meaningfully mitigate the racial inequality of a society. Just because you got a Negro president, a Negro chief of police, you got Negro teachers, Negro officers, it doesn't matter if these people don't have a positive self-image themselves, of the people whom they are, you know, culturally and racially connected. If they don't have a positive image or a viewpoint of those persons, if they don't have a certain political will and a certain mindset, it doesn't matter if they're black and they occupy a position. This is why I've been, I've been saying the whole politics of diversity and representation is tokenism. It's cheap tokenism. And it does nothing to substantively change the conditions in which black people find themselves. This is why corporations love it. Universities love it. This is why, brands love it. There's nothing that has to be invested in or nothing that has to be changed substantively in order to create a bunch of token niggas in token positions. It doesn't require anything. Dooley says, and thank you for the donation, by the way. Increased police presence, war on drugs, and crime bill were supported by black politicians and the community, but now they're blaming Biden. Well, I mean, he was part of it, though. But black people had a hand in this as well. But Biden had a hand in it himself. Biden bears some responsibility his damn self because he's the one who was the author of the crime bill. And shout out to Toya. Appreciate your donation, sis. She says, a mere token of repayment toward the inestimable value you provide to the black manosphere. Thank you, Gigi. Appreciate you. Thank you. You deserve a bomb for that one. All y'all do. Thank you, Toya. And thank you, Dooley. And thank you, Distinguished Legacy. Appreciate your help. But I mean, this is not an argument against racial diversity by and in and of itself, just like the author say. It's not trying to say that you shouldn't have diversity or you shouldn't shoot for diversity at all, but it means that diversity by itself, it misses the mark. It's insignificant. It's not substantive enough to actually change the conditions in which black people or other so-called out-group people find themselves. It's not enough. It's not enough. But I mean, like people like Kwame Ture understood this a long time ago. He discussed this in his book, Black Power, decades ago. But we keep making the same mistakes. Again and again. So ultimately, they say racial diversity without meaningful reallocations or redistributions of power might not only limit the possibilities for social transformation, but also potentially reproduce and legitimize the very forms of inequality the pursuit of racial diversity was intended to address. So if you got racial diversity without any substantive change or reallocation or redistribution of power, it not only limits the possibilities for social transformation, but also it can reproduce and legitimize the very power that you're seeking to disempower or seeking to dismantle. So diversity for diversity's sake is not enough. I don't know if you get that or if you understand that. So they say what they do in this paper. I'm not going to read the entirety of the paper, but it's enough to go off on. In order to explain and to get people to understand, it's deeper than just diversity. How could it possibly be that you got 5 black men on the police force and they're beating the motherfucking black guy just like the white police are? Just like fucking members of the Klan. Lynching, basically. How could it happen? So what they say is they draw on empirical, historical, and theoretical literatures, and they examine how, if at all, black police officers' race might shape how they police other African Americans. And they say fundamental to their approach is a Du Boisian concept of race and professional identity. Remember, I don't know if you know, but Du Bois says that, you know, every black person to some degree has a double consciousness. A black identity and another kind of identity. But the African American police officers have to, or any black official in any official capacity, has to reconcile two urges or drives. In the case of a police officer, to be blue, to be part of the organization, to be part of the pack. But you also are striving to be black to some degree, authentically, in one body. So you got different tensions pulling at you. Shout out to T Fitness for you. He says, Biden made widely racist remarks pushing the 93 bill. Black people supported the bill when it included programs for the community. Biden and the right wing erased the programs. Shout out to that brother. Appreciate you. And shout out to Admiral Smoke, otherwise known as Sandal. Rudy, you dog. He says, my GG rent due. Mistakes are made because our leaders and strategists aren't historians. We aren't organizing the people with the expertise needed to facilitate change. Must move past the Messiah ideology. I concur. Now, if you want to, you can come up here, man. I will invite you to come up here, or Officer Charles, or any of the other people who who think. You're welcome to, you're welcome to come and give your opinion on this. You served in an institution militaristically for the United States, so you might have some insight on this, whereas other people might not. And we're going to keep the visor closed tonight, though, on what we know about some of the things that happened in this particular case. But anyway, they say, the authors of this piece, they basically will explain how black police officers performed that negotiation and reconciliation. And it's not just a matter of individual choice and agency and individual commitment. There are structural forces at play as well, in much the same way the structural factors shape, though certainly did not fully determine, how black leaders, Foreman describes, mobilized various dimensions of the criminal justice apparatus to address the proliferation of crime and drug usage in American communities. So they say the remainder of the essay proceeds as follows. First, they're going to pay attention to Foreman's book and his account, where he focuses on individual agency and where he pays attention to structure. And in part two, they're going to build on that and discuss black police, and they're going to show that the very factors, including Fourth Amendment law, explicit and implicit biases, that explain why white police officers might systematically over-police and deploy violence against African Americans, arguably implicate black officers in the same way, just as well. So the very things that explain why white police might over-police or display violence to African Americans, it implicates black folks as well. Shout out to Ab Media 83. What's cracking with you, dog?
Hey, what's going on, doctor? How's it going?
Man, I'm doing all right, man. we dealing with another tragedy, but this time, we got to explain it and, understand it in ways that fall, apart from what we traditionally perceive it as. Because the issue normally is, okay, white people don't like us, and so therefore they kill us. But it's a lot of black people walking around here, man, who perceive themselves through white lenses. They may as well have white contacts on. Because they see themselves like white people do.
I think you hit it on the nail. Diversity is not enough. especially when it comes to black men. The term diversity is not enough.
Yeah, man. It's diversity by itself. You need people who are culturally and politically aware and psychologically healed to be in these positions of authority.
Mm-hmm. Also, let's take a step further. Intersectionality is not enough, especially when it comes to black men.
Well, like in this text, they're going to be apologetic to intersectionality, but I think only in relation to his lip service, because you can't leave black women out. As soon as you leave black women out, they're going to make a fuss about it and cry and shit like that. And so you can't move forward without saying, okay, you got your ass whipped too. So, they do say, okay. But here's the problem with intersectionality in my viewpoint. It seeks attention and recognition. That's the point of it, as far as I'm concerned. Now, I don't, look, everybody deserves to be acknowledged and recognized to a certain extent. Okay, I get it. But tokenism, representation is not enough. Tokenism and representation is not enough if the mentality is not right. And right now, black people have psychological conditions going on to where they basically suffer from not only Stockholm syndrome, but self-loathing and self-hate. This ain't nothing new, though. This shit has been discussed since damn Frantz Fanon was writing.
Mm-hmm. It's also my understanding that these 5 so-called police officers were part of a squad called Scorpion, and they would just go around messing with people.
And that's another issue. It's the structure. So if you plug black people into structures that are inherently unjust, unfair, violent, and extortionist, you're going to get the same results. Unless those black people have the capacity to resist against those systems or those structures. Like another thing that you got to be aware of, right? I don't know if you guys have ever seen or have had any exposure to something called the Harvard experiment with Stanley, the prison experiment. That's it. The Stanford prison experiment. You ever heard of that?
No, I haven't heard of it.
Go look that shit up. The Stanford prison experiment was an experiment in which they just basically took random people, students, and made some students officers or, officials in authority positions, and then they made other students prisoners. Now, there's no reality associated with any of this. So there's no actual officers, and there's no actual breaking of any kind of law or anything. It's just people playing roles.
And human nature will show you something.
And basically, the people who were playing the role of authority figures began to abuse their power and to exploit and to commit acts of extortion and violence and psychological torture to the people who were considered to be prisoners.
Yep.
And not only that, there's another experiment called the Milgram experiment, where you had a study done where, I'm just trying to frame this the right way. Okay, so ultimately there were these guys who were considered to be testers, and there were some people who were considered to be testees. The testers had to ask questions to the testees, and if the testees got the answers wrong, then the administrators of the testers, were supposed to administer shocks to the testees who failed to answer the questions correctly.
In other words, the first part of Ghostbusters 2?
Well, I don't, I'm not aware of it, but the whole point is, now all of it was rigged. Nobody got shocked, okay? But the shocking information about the testing was, and the way the test was constructed was that, first of all, if you So, but not only that, there was a person who was overseeing the testing, so to speak, like overseeing the testing, and that person wore a lab coat. And at any point in which the tester had questions about whether or not to administer the shock, the person who was in the lab coat would just basically say, "Please continue on with the testing. You must continue. You have to continue." And, people would have reservations and questions like, I don't know, like, should I administer these shocks? I mean, and increasingly and progressively, they had to give more and more voltage of shocks to the testees. And ultimately, I mean, they began to move up and up to the point where they would administer shocks that would be fatal to the testees. And they were just following orders from a person in a lab coat who wasn't even a real fucking scientist. I mean, it just shows you that people will fit into a system and not buck the system. They won't question the system. They won't demand justice within the system. They just find themselves within it, and they embody and they try to, execute the dynamics of what the system dictates. Okay? So in other words, there's a philosopher named Hannah Arendt. She says that basically evil comes into the world not always predicated upon the evil of, the evil intentions of persons, but by good persons to not
do anything,
resist against doing the wrong thing. Like for example, those studies were done primarily by Jewish descendants, right? Jewish scholars to try to figure out, well, how did something like the Holocaust happen? How did it happen? How could, normally decent people become okay with mass murdering like millions or hundreds of thousands of people? How could it happen? And it happens not because people have evil intentions, but because they don't know how to resist against authority. They don't know how to say no when something is off kilter.
Yeah. There's also some
So anyway, this basically, man, in the first section of this paper, they talk about how African Americans wanted to actually protect black people from violence and crime that was happening in the 60s and the 70s, right? So they wanted to get rid of it. So they wanted to stop the increase in crime and drug use. Okay, that's one of the things that they wanted to do. Okay, so they did everything they could to try to stop it at that time. Now, I'm not going to talk about what they say about intersectionality. To me, that's pretty much unimportant. Shannon Washington, if you want to have a discussion about it, you can come talk about it. Don't put nothing in the chat about it. Come speak about it. If you feel like you got a comment to make about it, like what's the solution, you tell me what the solution is. But don't come, put some shit in the chat like, well, what's the solution? You tell me what the solution is. I feel you, D-man. But you know what? I feed off trolls too. I eat trolls. They give me energy. They big me up like I'm Mario. I get gassed up. It's entertaining to me as well. I'm asking you, if you say what's the solution, step on up and tell me what you think the solution is. We already said what the solution is not. The solution is not just diversity by itself. I already demonstrated and showed most black people have contemptible images and perceptions of their own selves. Should I show you again? Do you want to see it again? I'm not going to play games, nigga. Look, I don't give a fuck. I'm not politically correct. I don't care.
Which doll is the black doll? And which one is the white doll?
That one.
Which doll is the pretty doll? Which doll is the nice doll? Which doll is the bad doll? Which doll is the nice doll? And which doll is the bad doll?
So you got black kids growing up, and this is what they thinking. These are not adults. These are children. And they have demeaning and contemptible views of their own selves. They know that they're black, but they believe that black is ugly, stupid, and bad. So if you got a group of people who are reared to believe, indoctrinated, inculcated with the belief system that there's something fundamentally flawed with them ontologically, psychologically, culturally, you think that that's not going to spill over into how they treat people when they become adults? Adam Smoke, talk to him. But hey, bro, look, I'm sorry, man, that I went off, but I'm not accepting no disrespect from no motherfuckers today, bro. Speak on it, saying, dog. What's cracking with you?
What's going on, fam?
What's happening with you? Hey, bro, I swear to God, I am not taking no disrespect from no motherfucking pink face, pale face motherfuckers today, bro. I'm not doing it.
The thing is that when you look at, remember, for those of us who have been around, right, we've been talking about institutions. Institutions are made of people, and then you have a culture. And so what you have to understand about the military and paramilitary organizations, man, is that these things are fraternities, right? And so these guys risk their lives for each other. And then the other part, especially with police officers, right? You know how they say, if you look into the abyss long enough, it'll suck you in. And sad and most unfortunately, with police officers, not making, excuses, but something that you have to take into account is that these guys are exposed to the very worst that humanity has to offer, right? So now when you look at all of these institutions working together, so when you tie in the reasons that cause crime, right, which are for the most part failures at a societal level, right? So let's say, for example, you get the deindustrialization of Black America, and then America as a whole, with jobs going overseas for NAFTA and everything else, and you haven't carefully planned for that transition in terms of what your population on the ground is going to do, right? So all of this stuff filters and ultimately will create crime. So when you talk about just simply putting diversity here in this one particular space, when the institution of the state makes these decisions, be it economic, be it legal decisions, economic decisions, so on and so forth, there's always a domino effect to it, right? So none of this stuff happens in isolation. This is all interconnected. So going back to to the police officers, man, like even for me, like when I was in the military, it's a fraternity. You have these guys back. They got your back, and it's you and them against the world. And sad and most unfortunately, because of the things that I just explained, right? You have the erosion of the family unit, and so with the erosion of the family unit, little by little, human beings are becoming wards of the states or the corporations, or just being outcasted by society altogether, right? So when you combine this and then what police in America have been designed to do, in the past, this is where we have this is ultimately where we have these types of problems. So when I was talking about when I first came to the space, right? Because I'm a Republican, and I know that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And I would hope to think that in the amount of time or the last few years in the space that you've spoken with me, you can see the perspectives that I come from. And so when you talk about a solution, what the political discussions for Black people should be is when you talk about racial equality, especially in the United States, what you're talking about, or at least from Sandog's perspective, what you should desire politically and what your rhetoric should be is infrastructure, is an overhaul of infrastructure. So if racism is now institutional and structural, new infrastructure should change that. So let's say, for example, if Black America were to say, okay, we want an overhaul of our police system, and then you look at things like Scandinavia, for example. Okay, well, how does policing work in Scandinavia? How does the prison system work in Scandinavia? And then you're like, okay, well, in those countries, they're really focused on rehabilitation, whereas the American prison system, in the past was a shortcut to labor, right? So you have to remember, once you hit Jim Crow, right, everything is a sneaky link to somehow get you back on the plantation, or a way to turn you back into free labor. So what you would have to do is you would have to look to change infrastructure that disrupts that supply chain, that ultimately turns the country into something else, right? So ultimately you would have to make decisions based upon where the money is funneling, and then you would have to say, okay, understanding that if racism is institutional, then maybe what I want a complete overhaul of infrastructure when it comes to education, housing, a lot of these different things. And then because that new infrastructure, God willing, and especially if you're involved from the beginning of the process, that new infrastructure or that 21st century thinking now comes with different and new ideologies versus the old institutions that were built to facilitate and maintain a certain type of lifestyle or ideology or philosophy for the country. So from Sandog's perspective, this is what I believe that the solution is, especially for people who want to see change, is what you want to do is you want to understand infrastructure, you want to understand public diplomacy and policy, and that's the kind of those are the types of moves that you make. But and then even in terms of police departments and all of that other kind of stuff, right? Because remember, you have police unions and everything else. So now with that type of infrastructure change, by default, you'll change how the union operates, and by default, you'll change how these institutions function, and how they think, right? So I'm not, like I said again, I'm not up here trying to defend nonsense, and everything else. But if you have the kind of job where whenever you walk out of the door, you have to make peace with yourself that this may be the last day you walk out of this door or come back through it, right? Then, then there are things that we as a society also have to consider when interfacing these people, especially the fact that these professions have the highest rates of suicide, and everything else. So for me, at least for Sandog, like I said, especially with how again, this is me as an individual, with how I look at institutions and the types of social and economic machines that we have, is that you won't undo this until you actually revamp the infrastructure, and then you're gonna have to somehow put the family unit back together, and then from there, make all the changes accordingly. So that this is Sandog's perspective, but know that again, these organizations, they're like fraternities, man, and we stick together. So if that institution has a particular culture, right? Even if that culture is anti-black, because remember, in these cultures, it's very easy for you to become anti-black, because especially if you're a cop, the things that you're gonna see are gonna blow your mind, man. When you have to see babies in the trash can and domestic violence and all of this stuff, and every time these calls come in, it's always your people. It's always your people. And then, so for those
It chips
guys
away at your humanity.
yeah, it chews away at your humanity. So it's
Chips
always,
away, slow by
yeah,
slow. You'd end up developing. I'm sorry for interrupting, Sandog. By the way, assalamu alaikum.
what's,
Yeah, what's good, brother?
yeah,
By
man,
the way, Green Gorilla, please don't hurt me. I'm trying to be civil. I don't want to get caught in fratricide. When you think about it, it breaks you down, because remember, if you're a black cop in a predominantly white institution, just like a black man in the white military. I'm sorry to say that, Sandog,
no, this is true.
but it's true. Yeah, I appreciate you understand where I'm coming from,
Yeah.
but you have to try to defend yourself, but at the same time, you're trying to maintain your own identity, but also try to ingratiate and try to integrate into a group that's going to give you a hard. That's going to make it impossible for you to integrate into. And when you're going through all these things with them, your humanity is sometimes chipped away in a certain way, and sometimes they have misconceptions about you. And in a place in a society where there's a contentious or a contemptuous relationship with law enforcement, whatnot, people always look at you. I remember, was it like if you remember, I got to use a movie quote, when in the Shaft movie from '99, there was that scene on the park bench where Samuel L. Jackson and Richard Roundtree were sitting after the case. What was it? And I remember something that Samuel L. Jackson said about the frustrations he had as being a black cop, because when he's a black cop, he's only seen as one thing or something else. Either he's always in that conflict where he's too black for the badge, too blue for the hood. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense. Like my only thing is this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm perfectly aware of the fact that many people who are members of these organizations are at the same time they're in a fraternity, and it requires them to have some level of fraternity, and loyalty and connectivity. It requires that. I'm not saying it doesn't, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, if you're a peace officer, which is what the police officers are, okay? They're peace officers. They have to understand the extent to which deadly force is permitted, okay? And I get it, man. Look, I understand sometimes you get caught up in a moment, but one of the things that you have to be able to show if you are a police officer is restraint. You have to have that virtue. You have to know, okay, when you've gone too far or when you haven't gone far enough. You have to have virtue in that regard as a police officer.
And sometimes when you find yourself in a certain situation, you're like, it's not that it ain't that day. I ain't having that shit. Sometimes, because our officers are human beings. And we all have a breaking point. I mean, like I said about the whole chipping away at your humanity, like Sandog mentioned, we all have a breaking point.
But this is what I want to.
Go ahead, sorry.
Let me say this. I know I'm interrupting you, right? But I have to. Okay. So look, multiple independent researchers, journalists, and federal government entities themselves have compiled an exhaustive record of civilians basically recently killed by the U.S. police. And they've compared that list with European countries' rates of police killings. And when they compared them to what's going on in other countries, in particular developed nations like Wales or some shit like that, or England, you see that like the United States killings for whites and blacks, they're disproportionately high.
Yeah.
Okay?
But that
Very.
but that remember, Gigi, but that's what I said about
The infrastructure.
Yeah.
We get it.
Yeah.
I get it. But let me finish my thought, right?
Okay.
In both England and Wales, there have been only 55 fatal police shootings in the past 24 years.
Correct.
Whereas 59 fatal police shootings occurred in the United States over the first 24 days of 2015. Consider also Iceland, right? Which is a small Scandinavian nation state. I think Sandor said something about
350. Yeah, he mentioned Scandinavia, but I would say, because I live in Scandinavia.
So there's only about 300, you only got about 300,000 citizens.
350,000 in Iceland alone.
One person has suffered a police death in that country in the past 75 years.
Yeah.
As opposed to, say, for example, California, or Stockton, California, which is a U.S. county that's basically made up of the same number of citizens. But they had 3 fatal police shootings in the first 5 months of 2015.
What the hell's going on down there is a question. Specifically.
Now look,
I'm sorry.
We know that in the United States, blacks are twice as likely to be 2.5 times or damn near 3 times as likely to be killed by gun violence from the police. Okay? But in short, among all industrialized nations, the United States is unmatched in its police lethality. Particularly its lethality of black folks, whether they're armed or unarmed, whether they're running away or not running. So the question is, what is the problem in the United States related to its lethality? Why? So, I mean, there are many theories about this. One could say, okay, you know, well, the West settler machismo that people in the United States have. We can say that it's a heterogeneous nation and there are all kinds of conflicts that are developed between people from different demographics, ethnicities, or whatever the case may be, racial groups, however you want to call it. But when we're talking about black men killing other black men in the same way that white men, you would think, given what's recently happened in the United States and in the country, that there would be some form of restraint shown on behalf of the police, especially when it comes to killing an unarmed black guy. I don't give a fuck if he's running or not. You would think that these guys have enough sense to say, okay, hey, bro, we got the motherfucker restrained. We have him restrained. Or he might be trying to run away, but you just don't continue to beat the shit out of him. This shit, America is just extremely violent.
Hate, abuse. Let's not forget. What was it? You are supposed to exercise restraint when you're an officer of the law. That's correct. But some people love the fact that when they are in law enforcement, there's a level of power that comes with it. Very few people respect the badge. A lot of people respect the gun.
So I
And
want to hold on
sometimes,
before you finish. I want to give a shout out to
oh
Marvin
yeah,
Soul. He says, "Thanks for the discussion. Without political, positive cultural education, we will only produce black oppressors." Fred Hampton mentioned this as well as Harold Cruz to some degree, and this is basically what the context of my discussion is about. I know I went off on a tangent on a troll, but ultimately, this is what the content of my discussion is.
I
Basically,
think there's a super chat for $99. You see it?
oh yeah, for from Mr. Heat. I already gave him like 2 or
Okay.
3 shots out, so I'm gonna give him
oh
another
okay.
one though. He does deserve it though. You know I fuck with him heavy. He knows it. You know he knows I rock with him heavy, man.
Everybody
Okay,
pitching
now, yeah.
pennies. Why can't we get a full round?
I gotta say it, GG. Niggas don't dance. All they do is this.
Wait. Can you repeat that again? Sandog?
Huh? Oh, they don't dance.
He
No
doing
more,
some
man.
old Outcast, man.
Yeah,
Some
man.
old.
I can't hear him. I'm sorry. I can't hear him right.
Yeah. So, yeah, but you know what I'm saying. But that would be the thing, right? And so you're gonna have to dig, because remember, American laws are based on Anglo laws, right? And this is what I'm trying to say. You're gonna have to dig what animates the way our police and penal systems work from, again, coming from England and into the United States, and compare that, and like I said, and compare that to the rest of the world, especially, and then you have to take into account, again, like, again, so many things: economic opportunities, discrimination, because again, although America is a constitutional republic, right, for the most part, democratic societies, or societies like this, work a lot better when the population is smaller, right? And so there are a lot of things that you have to take into account, and what I think, especially for Black people, and I'll say it again, a lot of the way our country operates is outdated compared to where the rest of the world is headed. So right now, right, my neighbors up, our neighbors up the street in Saudi Arabia is going to build a city, GG. It's called Neom. It's under construction now.
I've heard of it.
And
I've seen it.
the city, GG, is a straight line, right? It's a straight line. I think it may connect between 3 different countries. It's a straight line, so that means it'll be temperature controlled and everything. And for the most part, human beings will live in the cities, but the cities will be ran by AI and robots, right? So
Have they broken ground yet on that one?
yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. So this is, so again, like this is the thing, right? When you talk about, so for the American people, or for African Americans, especially, or those who are dealing with these forms of discrimination, you're really going to have to go back into history in these societies, understand what animated them to make those decisions, and then look at other societies who are a little bit more advanced, right? Other societies who are not animated on the fact that, okay, slaves are 80% of my GDP and I set them free, and how do I keep the money going, right? So you're going to have to look at other societies and see what they've done, and you're going to have to push for modernization, because so much of the American institutions, right, or what has animated them, has been built on, to some extent, or influenced to a large extent, by a lot of our historical and cultural gobbledygook. So again, right, to uproot some of this stuff, right? Okay, not throw out the baby with the bathwater, but to uproot some of this stuff and build things new on top of it may provide a lot of the solutions, or the cultural changes and relief that we're looking for.
And
So,
you know, I'm all for it, but I want to hear the one brother, Shannon Washington, speak. He's been here for a minute and hasn't said anything because we've kind of monopolized the conversation. Let him speak for 1 second, and then I'm gonna make a point.
no, I appreciate it. So first of all, I just want to say I wasn't trying to be a troll when I made the comment about defund the police. I was trying to see what your thoughts are. First of all, I appreciate the content. I think that a lot of the discussion is very meaningful, and I think it brings a lot of light to a lot of serious conversations. All right, so that's my first thing. I just want to say that. The
Oh, for
second
sure,
thing is
man.
that Oh, I'm sorry. The second thing was that I think for me, I think one of the biggest problems in America is just that the number of guns in the hands of the citizens. I think when you have to police, when you acknowledge that every citizen in the country can have a firearm concealed, you have to approach the situation very differently. I was at Prairie View University when Sandra Bland that whole thing happened, and in Hempstead, Texas, most of the population is the students. So I was trying to organize them to try to push legislation that would kind of somewhat educate and teach the cops about different policies and de-escalation. But what I realized personally is that shit don't really do anything. You can't really de-escalate when you think someone has a firearm. You know what I mean? So that's like for me. I think when you compare other countries, Wales, Switzerland, all the other stuff, cops don't have to engage the same way you do in America because anyone can have a firearm at any moment. That's one. And the second, that's my last point was that a lot of these situations, because people have firearms, there is a lot of there's like the giving the cops a lot of benefit of the doubt a lot of the times that hey, this person may have had a firearm, this person may have had the opportunity to do some shit like that, right? And as a black person, you're well aware that people see us as an innate threat. I think I saw a study years ago that they said the average black male compared to white people, they think that we're like 3 to 4 years older and weigh like 20 pounds more. I played sports in college, and every person who was black, all the white coaches thought they were just naturally bigger and stronger and more athletic. Even if we ran the exact same times, we benched the same amount of weight, we are just naturally seen as more athletic. I think it comes from like us seeing us as still as like being animals and shit. And so because of all those things contributing to that, I feel like there really is no really good thing. And I hear people say like defund the police and shit like that. But at the end of the day, all you're gonna do is the cops gonna have to police the same way, and we're gonna be discriminated, and we're gonna be policed, and we're gonna be shot, and we're gonna be killed the exact same way. And that was all I wanted to say. Those 3 points. I appreciate the conversation.
Hey, thank you, bro.
Excuse
I
me, Mr.
appreciate
Sowell.
that.
Mr. Sowell. I'm sorry, Shannon. Mr. Oh, never mind. He's left.
Yeah, he decided he just wanted to make his points and burn out, which is cool with me. And
All
hey,
right,
look,
fair.
I get it. I understand. But at the end of the day, America, the citizens are not about to get rid of the guns. It's not going to happen in America. So if the police are constantly in fear of their own lives, predicated upon the idea that they might get killed by any average citizen with a gun, then, you're going to see more deaths. And unfortunately, you're going to see more black deaths because, as the guy said, there's bias out there that believes that black people are an inherent threat.
Absolutely.
It is what it is. So, all I want to do, initially, what I wanted to do was to kind of trace the steps of this argument, right? So one of the things that the paper basically tries to explain is that part of the reason why you have such harsh criminal laws at the current moment, especially that are basically being utilized to incarcerate black folks, is because black politicians and black officials themselves called for it, okay? They wanted to get rid of the guns, as the brother was saying, right? And to rid the community of the Pookies, the small group of criminals who were terrorizing it. At the same time, we already know that marijuana was, contemporarily has been decriminalized. But in the 60s, you had black, politicians who wanted to criminalize marijuana because they saw it as, a gateway drug for one, and then they also saw it as, like a catalyst for crime, right? And so what they did was they basically pushed for the laws that would, create mandatory minimums, and that, you know, with 3 strikes laws, all of these laws. So black politicians were for this shit, okay? But the irony about it is, and you know, the decisions, right, and the irony related to them is that neither marijuana criminalization nor gun control has actually stemmed the tide on these issues. It's not
Because
really...
nobody wants to look at the root cause of these things. That's the problem.
They know what the root cause of this shit is, okay? Like,
no, they don't want to look at the root cause. They know what it is, but they refuse to look at it, is what I mean, sir. Sorry.
Right. So here's this paragraph here where it says African Americans wanted more law enforcement, but they didn't only want law enforcement. But see, now we're in a situation where black people are only calling for law enforcement, or they sound like this punk bitch ass white boy that came here talking a whole bunch of shit about morality. When this situation, we hadn't even begun to talk about criminality in the neighborhood or anything else. And this motherfucker want to enter the stage and start talking about morality and shit like that and subjective personal responsibility. I'm like, man, fuck this dude, man. You ain't got the right to come enter into our conversations and say a goddamn word about our people.
But that's the thing, GG. Even across the board, Americans have no idea of institutions and how these things work. That's what I'm saying. Again, even from our own education system, right? As I understand, kids don't even take civics classes anymore. Right, and civics tells you how your society works. So that's also like, even for me, when I lived in the States, when I had the time, right? So initially, I was thinking about running for mayor where I lived when I got out of the military, had I stayed. And so we had a frat brother at the time who used to be a mayor in the neighboring town, right? And so whenever I was free, I would go to city council meetings, right? And guess what? Nobody was there, right? So those those people who were sitting on city council, man, they had carte blanche to vote on whatever they was going to vote on, because the representation from the actual community itself that could speak out at the beginning of the time for the most part was nil. And I believe that, so, because even in our discussion about the state, it's one of the things that I forgot, right? So without civics, I don't think that a lot of Americans understand what their duties are as a citizen. So we understand everything that the state is supposed to do, right? But we don't understand that as a citizen, yes, you obey the law, yes, you pay taxes, but you also have to vote, right? And you also defend the nation, right? And that in and of itself doesn't just mean arms, but with the value systems that whatever the community has, right? So think about.
I get what you're saying. Look, I get it. Black people ought to be involved in autonomous decision-making processes such that they can have an impact over their own lives, because that's how you actually procure freedom, correct?
Yes.
So, I mean, like, if you hand over the reins of government and people act in official capacities while you don't act in any official capacity whatsoever, because the only thing you do is just seasonally vote for representatives, right? Then for the most part, you're handing over your governance to another group of people. I've made this, case to a certain extent before, right? Namely that, even like, say, for example, Ferguson, Missouri, when all of that stuff took place and all of the tragedy associated with the looting or whatever the case, when it all finally settled down and boiled down, black people still did not step up and take over the reins of government in the city of Ferguson. I mean, I guess there was an increase in citizen participation, but for the most part, business as usual resumed. And I mean, but this is the case, for the vast majority of Americans, though. Like, Americans perceive the political process as consumer-like voting. You vote for who you like you're going to buy a pair of shoes from Foot Locker or Foot Action. Or if you're picking up a pair of high heels at your favorite department store. That's how citizens perceive voting in America. They don't perceive it as engaging in a protracted discussion with other people. They don't perceive it as lobbying or petitioning or developing letters and writing into their congressman. They don't perceive it as going to talk to public officials and to question them. They just sit back and watch the TV and like, okay, I went to vote. And they feel like they've performed their civic duty.
But here's another way to look at it. There's a reason they took out the civics. And now they didn't, they took out civics for a reason, because they didn't want the population to be a conscious civic society. They don't want a citizenry. They want a population that's subservient. Understand that. You see this in many states that are ruled by authoritarianism and whatnot. They want you to be obedient workers. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people, when you ask them about, taking part in their civic duties as the citizenry, a lot of them are going to say, "Well, I don't know how to do it. It's what is." They're going to be convinced. They're often convinced that the process is far too complex. It's far overwhelming for them to handle, and then they're also fearful what's going to happen if they start organizing. Because you see what happened to, because a lot of them will bring up what happened to many civil rights leaders, what happened to them, how they were made an example of what happens if you try to stand up or organize. Yeah, nobody wants to be a martyr. Look at it that way.
Well, shit, I tell you what, white people, they didn't give a fuck. They put their dicks on the chopping block when it came to their freedom.
Yeah.
I mean, like when it came to taxation without representation, they went to war for the shit.
Yeah.
They didn't say, "Oh, well, I'm afraid, I might die because I love my nigga TV and I love my brown liquor and my menthol cigarettes." They didn't say that shit. They was like, "Okay,
no, they didn't.
We gonna get taxed and we don't have any representation in government. You mean you're gonna make decisions about our lives?" They went to war for just that.
Why do you think they look what happened in Boston Harbor?
They went to war just for that shit. And they used an analogy as if they were slaves because they were being taxed without being represented. And then you had real actual slaves, the descendants of slaves, who were basically like, we love America.
No, you don't. No, I don't mean.
I'm just keeping it. I'm not trying to be ignorant. I am ignorant though. Like, if the occasion arises for me to be ignorant. Okay.
It is what it is.
But I mean, at the end of the day, I think Sandog is right when he says that, institutions need to be updated. But the question is, why won't the institutions become updated? Well, for one, white people have no impetus to change the institutions because they work just fine for them for the most part. Okay?
Man, you just took my question. You took that quote right out of my mouth because what I wanted to say, I wanted to quote Cicero. Because remember, Cicero would always ask the question, or any situation, he said, "Cui bono?" Who benefits from the current situation? Or to whose benefit is this current arrangement? Anytime you want to change something, the people who benefit or the benefactors of any situation are going to give you pushback.
Yeah, but that's the thing. But even for what you even want to call the common everyday white person, so to speak, they're not benefiting from this, right?
Nope.
So
they're under the illusion of it, though.
What you have to remember is that 1950s America is gone, where it was perceived that they were living high off the hog, right? So what you have to remember is what you're coming out of the Great Depression. There was World War I and World War II, so nobody else in the world at the time is producing shit. Right, so at that time, everything is made in America, right? You would have had the Great Society and everything else that happened, and so you have this growing middle class and suburban homes, and
coming out of depression and whatnot.
Yeah, Leave It to Beaver and everything else. So that type of progress was a very specific time, a specific window in American history you know, say, or world history. And so, at the end of the day, across the board, man, for many of us, regardless of phenotype, right, you would have, you know, the illusion of inclusion, right, where Americans haven't had a raise collectively since 1964. You have a shrinking middle class, and the family unit is dying. All of that is tied to policy. So the way that there's an unholy alliance with African Americans and the Democratic Party and the soft power that's there that people vote for maybe to their own detriment, it also exists. Like I said, it also exists on the other side. So at the end of the day, we're living what Martin Luther King's greatest fear was, which is willful ignorance. Right. So now, at this stage of the game, man, you know, probably for the most part, people are just up here, you know, many of us are up here just choosing this stuff. So if I'm a white guy and I'm sitting around looking at black people like, well, that's just what they do, right? You know, or you know, you know, so I'm ultimately asking, for a lot of trouble. So for example, when I was a kid, I used to read books by a man by the name of William Cooper, right? Behold the Pale White Horse. And, you know,
Mm-hmm.
he's talking about, you know, policemen dressed in all black uniforms with tanks and black helicopters and drones kicking in doors and everything else. And I'm like, how the hell is this going to happen? And who's going to let that happen, right? And so, shout out to Nazi Germany, and then shout out to the United States, right? So when you get when you get people who get up on stage and say, "I'm going to be tough on crime," and that means that I'm going to be tough on these black people or these Mexicans or whatever, or these poor white people or whatever that's out there, right? I'm going to be tough on crime, and then all of a sudden, instead of dealing with the problems that are systemic, right? Because at the end of the day, the police kicking down your door and being tough on crime is addressing a symptom for a failure in society. It's not, like I said, it's not the actual cure. And so for certain segments of our society, be it racism or the bitterness of having to deal with racism, these are the things that keep us blinded from looking at what's happening, from what's actually going to happen, you know, on the ground. So you have to kind of look at it from a 50,000 view up and talk about ultimately what, like I said, what's the cure. So if you were to follow like a lot of white spaces on the internet, right, their single parent families are going up, and you know they're starting to have certain issues. So where Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu wrote the conspiracy to destroy young black boys, right? Decades later, you're starting now to get white authors. I remember in 2006, I can't remember her name. I saw on Fox News, but it was a white female author who came on Fox News in 2006 talking about the war against boys, right? So there are segments in the white
Might have been
population.
Christina Hoff Summers, or it could have been. You know, there's a guy named Warren Farrell who also talked about the boy crisis and shit like that.
It's Christina Hoff Summers. And so for people in the white community who are conscious of it, they understand that Black America is the canary in the coal mine of where we're all headed, if, like I said, if you're not careful. So again, like I said, I'm not anti-reparations. So part of repairing America ultimately is the reparations that will be due to African Americans, right? Because the irony is that this damaged culture of people in America also hold your culture. They make your music, they make your music, they make your dances, you know, and all that stuff and everything else, right? So if you wanted to kind of change the cultural trajectory of America, you would also have to help to change the condition of these people, because again, right, unbeknownst to African Americans, right, they have a lot of influence on people's perspective and how they think, simply for the most part because they control or they have heavy influence for the most part. Not going to say control. They have heavy influence on the country's culture. So I think so. Again, so back to my original points, right? If you want to break up these fraternities and or these cronies and these blocks, and everything else, man, you're really gonna have to fight for infrastructure, and that's something that the American people are gonna have to do, because you have non-state actors in it as well. So probably one of the reasons why you don't have a high-speed monorail, again, I would have to study it, but I'm just making an assumption, right? So probably one of the reasons why you don't have a high-speed monorail is because the guys like Spirit Airlines and everything else who are invested in short hop flights, intra United States or CONUS, right? That's a problem for them. So whether you're Amtrak, Greyhound, the big three and all of these other people, right? Gigi and them having a monorail where Gigi is like, yo, okay, I live in St. Louis, but I work in Kentucky because the monorail can get me there in 40 minutes. Right? So like these are all the types of things that you're actually working against, if, like I said, if you're not careful. So if you're living in whatever city or whatever state and they talked about a monorail and that monorail got scrapped, chances are lobbyists, any form of lobbyists between automakers and guys who are in the passenger transportation industry are probably working against you unbeknownst to you, because these are the things that hurt their bottom line, as opposed to people understanding their civic duties and bringing everyone to the table. Because at the end of the day, the guys at the top or your representatives are not going to govern themselves peacefully on your behalf. Remember, America is not a democracy. It is a constitutional republic. So these are your representatives. You're not ruled by the mob in America, right?
Yeah, but these people don't represent us anymore, man. Like, I mean, we could go into, how, man, America is a pay-to-play dollarocracy as opposed to a constitutional republic. I mean, like the lobbyists and the wealthy get what they want in relation to legislation. You even had Trump admit the shit. Like, the tax laws are set up for wealthy Americans. It's not set up for average American citizens. And the odd shit about it is, the left has become so obsessed with tokenism and issues related to diversity that the populist policies of, like, the past, which was what the left usually used to run on, it's been taken over and co-opted by the right now. So, like, Donald Trump becomes the populist president of the people. Hey, Wolf, turn your mic off because you got a lot of feedback, dog. You know what I'm saying? Unless you talking. You know what I'm saying? So, we no longer have a party that's actually attendant to material dialectics. It's not about material dialectics or economics anymore. It's about who's able to have sex with who can blow whose booty hole out, who can marry who, and who can change their gender to what. And what they actually are asking for is not a rehaul of the material dialectics of the system itself, but to plug diverse people into slots that are already occupied by so-called patriarchs or people who are privileged. They don't want to change the system and make it more, more equitable. And I ain't talking about equity in terms of just treating people exactly the same. I'm talking about the gap between the wealthiest and the poorest Americans. It needs to be closed to some degree. And even conservatives realize this shit. Yeah. Like Jordan Peterson and recently the Zizek motherfucker. It was at least 5 years ago, but to me that's recently as it pertains to academia. They were like, okay, and Jonathan Haidt as well. Like, in the last 3 to 5 years, they was like, look, the hierarchy in America creates a problem. The inequality, if it becomes too large, it becomes problematic for political peacefulness or solvency. Okay, because if the inequality is too large and the citizens don't feel like they have any role to play within the formation of the contract or the maintenance of it, then motherfuckers start to rebel. There's no investiture anymore. Okay, they feel like they have nothing to actually invest in the system, so they become the biggest threats to the system. All right, so I mean, at the end of the day, what I wanted to do is just kind of stay focused on what happens to blacks when blacks actually occupy positions that have been traditionally reserved for white folks. And my conclusion is that diversity by itself is not going to change black people and the way that they're orientated towards seeing other black people when they already only see themselves as attenuated and defective versions of white folks.
Understand it this way as well.
That's
I
true.
mean,
Well,
excuse
I
me,
mean,
smoke,
again,
if I may.
Exhibit A, sorry, but just Exhibit A, right? Your current African nations, right? Be it Nigeria or or Kenya or whatever, coming out of colonialism and dealing with neo-colonialism. You know what I'm saying? So I think examples of those nations, GG, also, like I said, also prove and justify your point. And I hope that my discussion on institutions and infrastructure didn't deviate, because it goes back to what you're saying, right? So, for example, it's Nigeria, right? And the British pick up and leave. They're gone, but all of the political, social, and other institutions are still in place, right? So what is Nigeria going to do? It's going to continue of serving its purpose of extracting money from this location to send it to another location, right? So if you look at all of the African leaders, right? If you look at all of the African leaders like Patrice Lumumba or Idi Amin, if he's controversial to you, or Robert Mugabe, out of Zimbabwe, right? Those guys either got killed or they got squeezed out. So all of the African guys who wanted to go into different systems like socialism or come up with something on their own and everything else, especially right after colonialism, those dudes got whacked and they got squeezed out. Right.
Yeah, and that's the issue, right? So
I can give an example of that actually, because because like when people talk about Patrice Lumumba, you cannot talk about him without also mentioning his political rival Moise Chamba, who ended up getting axed before 1970 as well. But like when you talk about neocolonialism, there's one person whose name I came across. I saw it in a meme once. He was a former vice president of Zambia under Ken Kaunda. His name was Simon Kakwepwe, and he said something really intriguing. He said, if African countries do not manage their independence properly, then their colonizers shall return as their investors. Understand what he meant by that?
Yeah.
I mean, it goes without saying, like, if you don't develop your own institutions and means by which to protect your own people and develop autonomy, then the institutions are going to just be self-maintaining.
Those institutions are meant to.
They're going to continue to fulfill their functions. Now, those
institutions are meant to maintain a certain status quo. Just because you're free doesn't necessarily mean you're completely independent.
Well, that means you're not free. That means you're not free. See, people think that freedom means that you have a system of negative liberty in place, and like one of the things people don't understand is domination. They have no concept of it. They talk about it all the time, but they have no real understanding of what domination actually is. Like,
I'll give you an example.
Hold on, bro. I'm going to give you an example.
Oh, sorry.
It's the GG show, dog.
My bad.
So, like, one of the things people have to understand is if you're doing what someone who dominates you wants you to do, they don't have to intervene or construct, or obstruct or force, because you're doing what they want. You could be dominated and not even know it because your choices are basically being performed in concert with the person who's dominating you, but fall outside of the scope and the range of what they allow for in terms of your decision making, and then see what happens. That's how you determine whether or not you're dominated, right? So all I'm trying to articulate is, and we got to move on because we can stay stuck on this to the point where we'll be fixated on just talking about how the institutions exist and how when we fit into them, we'll basically, just carry out the mission and function of those institutions without actually being mindful that we probably need to alter or manipulate them to what the current conditions dictate. But like one of the things people are not mindful of is this, right? We often look at black folks as if they have a certain political or mental disposition prior to coming into a job or having or being a member of an institution. We automatically think that black people have liberation on their minds. You know what I'm saying? So like one of the goals is like, okay, but we need to diversify the police force because by so doing, we'll, get people who are progressive minded in these positions. But then that begs the question, what makes you think that black people in and of themselves are necessarily progressive just because they occupy a position? And that they're, by there being diversity in relation to skin color is going to create the diversity of political impact that you think, right? And this is why I have this, outline. It says one of the major goals of the civil rights movement was to enlist black police officers, and the purpose was twofold: to end discrimination in the police force, which one could argue is an admirable goal, right? A worthwhile goal. And to curb police brutality against the black community. However, neither goal was realized. So you don't have an end to discrimination in the police force, nor do you have an end to police brutality in the black community. And then the article goes on to further say that people who advocate for civil rights and for diversity, they make assumptions about the attitudes of black police officers and the role they would actually play to combat discrimination. The case for black police has always been premised on the unquestioned assumption of racial solidarity between black citizens and black officers. But, he says, blacks who joined police departments had a far more complicated set of attitudes, motivations, and incentives than those who pushed for diversity or, for anti-discrimination. The officers did not conceive of their role within the police department as extensions of civil rights. What they basically were looking for was a good-ass job, a stable and secure benefits and things of this nature. Like, they not trying to improve the quality of the black community and to save the fucking race. They trying to have a good job. They give a fuck less about the black community. They're not thinking like, in a holistic way. They're thinking about their bottom line. Like, what can this job do for me? They can give a fuck less about the black community. So the question then is, why do you think the diversity in and of itself, without having people with the right mindset in these positions, why do you think you're going to get a different outcome?
So I would say that's I 100% agree with that. I just want to make these two. I want to say these two things. One, I think a lot of like intersectionality and diversity and inclusion initiatives are overly idealistic. They have this assumption that people of certain, demographics, like you mentioned earlier, have a certain set of, experiences, which will guide their like morality to a certain point, so they make certain decisions in that, position or role, which is unrealistic. And I think when you say that people just wanted to check, that's the realist. People just need to check. So all that idealism goes out the window, right? The second thing is that I think a lot of times when they have these positions available and these hiring practices, they purposely try to hire people who aren't going to change the structures. Like, for example, if you ever look at CNN or Fox News, they're purposely hiring people who have a certain ideal, they have a certain view on reality. And so because of that and their hiring practices, you're only going to get a certain type of person in that position to begin with. So both those things combined, you're never going to get anything to change purely with diversity and inclusion. So I thought it was always a failure. I have a lot of friends who are feminists and super liberal Democrats, and they always push for that kind of stuff. And I always thought it was foolish. And it's kind of sad that, it takes shit like this of a black man getting beaten to death that people realize that, hey, this is fool's gold. This shit ain't going to move the needle.
Yeah. What you have to realize is that there has to be a way of communicating, right? The black man as the everyman, because what happens is once Title VII gets hijacked in civil rights, right? When you look at the feminist movement, right? So intersectionalism exists for a reason, because there were people began to see or understand that the feminist movement was only dealing with a certain demographic of women, right? Not necessarily addressing the issues of all women. So those women and that time of the feminist movement, they wanted to be equal to a certain subset of men, right? The top 10 or 5% of the American society. So now what that does is that now turns civil rights into a overcorrection, right? So to say, okay, so to say in order to make everybody in America equal or more fair, to an extent, right? Some way, somehow, we all need to somehow fit in the top 10 or 5%, of the United States of America. Whereas if you're looking at black men materially on the ground for civil rights, it's like, yo, hey, that job that dude got, painting the Brooklyn Bridge, that comes with a nice salary and the medical benefits and everything else. This is what I'm fighting for. This is what I'm looking to gain, or just the right to be in the military, right? So now, once you get the hijacking of Title VII, the average man or the average Joe no longer applies, right, to what people in America will start to see freedom as. So the definition of freedom, at least from Sandog's perspective, or the objectives of civil rights, fundamentally changed with the hijacking of Title VII and the people behind it and what their political agendas, wants, and desires are. Right? So this is again. So this is where you get it, and also to Gigi's point, right? What what we would need to understand about our history, right? Because I have aunts and uncles who are out there with Dr. King, and what they told me was that wasn't all those people out there. That's not how all of Black America felt at the time, right? So when you look at the civil rights movement, whoever's moving with Stokely Carmichael, Martin, or whoever, right? They was like, yo, that's a minority of people, and a lot of them were younger people, right? That was not the overall sentiment of Black America or desire of Black America in order to quote and unquote deal, deal with civil rights issues, right? So again, a la what, like when you look at what Martin Luther King said about the northern states, right? And this is everything that we're addressing, right? Because in the northern states, again, it will be invisible to the naked eye. You would have to have a firm understanding of public diplomacy and policy in order to combat the racism that was above the Mason-Dixie line, right? So when you look at the United States of America, sad and most unfortunately, right? Again, without understanding culture, without understanding institutions, right? Because again, even racist white people at the time agreed with the fact that, again, from giving it the eyeball test, it looks bad, it looks really ugly, right? It looks bad, it looks really ugly, and it doesn't help your cause. So if you follow like a lot of white nationalists on the internet now, their tones are quote unquote, for many of them, are a bit softer in an attempt to make them sound more intellectual. So again, the fact that most Americans do not have a knowledge of civics, of because okay, so you're illiterate, you're functionally illiterate when it comes to how your society works, how your economy works, and then the laws and the policies that facilitate that financial distribution. So a lot of us are illiterate in regards to the things that we need to know that would help us to develop or facilitate our, like I said, our own freedom. So sending black cops into these institutions again, because these institutions have a culture, and people, human beings for the most part, are tribal, and they are going to look to fit in into the culture. So if you were in the U.S. Army at a time, let's say for example, and you were a woman, right? So those women would end up looking like the men over time because they were looking to integrate. So they would have the same buzz cut, that they would have the same buzz cuts and the same hard stonewall looks as many of the men do, right? So I mean, it's a recent or new thing now where you'll see women in the Air Force with painted nails and their hairstyles and everything else. But the women, like I would say, from what I observed, like through the 80s and 90s or whatever, who had came up, right? They um they that's how they were, that's how they had to that's what they did to integrate in order to fit in, and to be and to be taken seriously, just to use them as an example. And then again, the same thing for many black officers. And then again, on the level, like I said, I've experienced it, right? Where for many of us, the idea is that you're not smart enough to be there because um, you I don't know, I can't remember the demographics of black officers, but in the combat arms, we were a very small pool of people. And as a matter of fact, a lot of some of the guys that they would accept off the bat will be guys that either went to the military academies that they went to, or if you walked in the door and said, okay, I went to Stanford, I went to Harvard, because the down low, at least in the military, what a lot of white officers were called HBCUs. They didn't call them historically black colleges and universities. They called them historically bad colleges and universities, right? So which also now shapes what they believe about the students, about the students, and the level of or quality of their organizations. And so you get a lot of guys who will do a lot of adaptations or code switching or whatever it is, in order to fit into those institutions, especially if their aim is to advance in said institution. It's like
exactly. So look.
Yeah.
Here's the deal, man. When it comes to police officers in the U.S., man, and the major police departments all over the country, man, you got a lot of minorities in these PD departments, bro. Chicago, 47% of the fucking police department is minority. In Houston, 54% of the police department is minority. In L.A., 64% of the police department is minority. In New York, damn near half of it. In Philadelphia, 43% of it, right? And so it's not trivial, right? The numbers related to minority participation in these police departments. So then this begs the question, why isn't the extrajudicial in killing, and violence directed towards black citizens diminishing, or minority citizens diminishing? And they say, first, the legal backdrop, which is institutional, right, it's the same for black and white officers. And they both draw on the Fourth Amendment as a source of empowerment to target other African Americans, whether they black or white, okay? Second, or unconscious racial biases might lead black police officers to aggressively police other African Americans. And I just showed you the dial test. I did that for a reason. Think of these biases as same race biases or intra-racial biases. I hear this shit in the manosphere all the time. Like, in fact, the whole conversation surrounding Pookies and shit like that is emblematic of intra-racial bias, man.
Yes.
I mean, you can call it what you want. Third, black police officers, like white police officers, might experience a set of anxieties or vulnerabilities that increase the likelihood that they will mobilize violence against other African Americans. Okay? An example of what we mean is masculinity threat. Like, oh, you know what I'm saying? Like, if I don't step up and beat this motherfucker ass, then I'm gonna be perceived as less than a man. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you get, in relation to policing, right?
Correct.
A new body of research demonstrates the police officers who feel that their masculinity is being challenged or undermined in the context of a particular action are more likely to use violence than officers who do not experience that masculinity threat. And we know black men have masculinity threat, especially if everybody's trying to be a goddamn alpha man. Everybody wants to be alpha and shit like that, right? So another example is racial anxiety. Research on this concept shows that police officers who worry that they will be perceived as racist in particular interactions are more likely to use force against black citizens than officers who do not experience racial anxiety. Okay? And then another reason to believe that black police officers might end up racially targeting African Americans relates to structural features of policing. If police officers are specifically deployed to proactively police communities in which African Americans live, which I'm pretty sure those black officers were, because they know white people are not going to send a bunch of niggas, jump out boys, to a fucking white area in the county to police them motherfuckers. Now say you've ever heard or seen some shit like that.
No.
I'll wait for any motherfucker in the audience, black, white, Latino, or Asian, to tell me, give me the evidence of a fucking unit like the one that was deployed in fucking Memphis, where you got like unmarked cars and motherfuckers with plain clothing, they jump out and they start beating and harassing and searching motherfuckers. Where in the white community have you seen this shit?
Never.
White people, black Negroes don't arrest white people and beat the fuck up, beat the shit out of them like that. Now do they?
No.
They know what the ramifications will be if they did.
Bruh, when have you heard of a case where a group of 2 or 3 black motherfuckers beat the shit out of some white boy, bloody fucking, to a bloody pulp? Fucked him up bad.
No.
You never have, you never will.
So anyway, they basically, the black community is over-policed anyway. And when you get black people who are police officers, they send them to the black areas to police. They don't send them motherfuckers to these suburbs and shit.
Of course not. I mean, where have you heard of white people responding or complying to what a black officer says to them?
Hey, bro.
Unless it's absolutely necessary.
Bro.
9
times out of 10, man, I ain't gonna say it don't ever happen. I'm pretty sure it does in certain respects and in certain fucking domains. Like traffic tickets, maybe yes. But like police is like jumping the fuck out the car, randomly searching motherfuckers. Man, it ain't happening, man, in these suburbs, dog. It ain't happening, bro.
It ain't happening.
I know for a fact, bro. We already know, man, white boys use more drugs than black people have ever used, bro. Yeah. I don't give a fuck how many crackheads you done seen in the hood. It's some meth heads out there that's on some way more fucked up shit than black people ever have been. But you know,
more than anyone can imagine.
But niggas on meth now, though. Niggas on everything now.
What?
But yeah, niggas on meth. What you think all that ecstasy shit is? That's meth, man.
I'm glad I never messed with that. I'm glad I never messed with that.
The ecstasy is methamphetamine, dog. That's what that shit is. They call it ice back in the day. I knew cats that was selling that shit in the hood 25 years ago.
Oh.
Straight up. I'm not bullshitting you. Okay?
No, I believe you.
But I went to a white high school, elite white high school. Them white boys was getting fucked up.
Unsurprisingly.
They was getting fucked up. It ain't too many white professors I know that ain't gave me fucking stories or told me stories about them getting fucked up off X, meth, cocaine, mushrooms, opium, all kind of shit. You name it, they done it. Acid.
Man, I remember someone telling me some crazy ass stories of their experiences, and this was in the Middle East. And I was like, I'm not surprised.
But your ass, but they ain't got no niggas are not selling rich ass white boys dope.
Nope. They're getting it from somebody else. They know where to get to that shit.
Niggas might sell every now and then. A white boy might have a black plug if he done fucked up his white plug. But primarily, they going to white boys to buy their dope. White frat boys and all kind of shit. Mm-hmm. I know this. I've seen it with my own fucking two eyes. Okay? It is what it is. You think they jumping out for white boys and shit trying to fucking get these motherfuckers some cases?
Nope.
They not doing it, man. You think Biden is gonna have the jump out boys fuck with his son Hunter and shit?
Nope.
They gonna send his ass to the Betty Ford clinic. They gonna send your ass to prison.
They'll write the laws, but they'll enforce it differently.
But exactly. But when black people police, they police the hood, don't they? They stop and frisk. They get awarded like their incentives. How many stop and frisk did you do? How many tickets and citations did you give out? How many number of arrests have you performed? Right? Mm-hmm. Black police officers have to deal with the same set of conditions as white folks in those circumstances. And they form some camaraderie around whether or not they met their quotas and shit like that.
Man, I wish Charles was here. He would have given us some great insights in this discussion.
He's gonna have a conversation about it.
I'm sure he
on his own channel. He probably letting shit die down for a minute. I would, but I don't have access to his Facebook or no shit like that. You know what I'm saying? So I'm pretty sure, like Admiral probably, Sandal probably got his Facebook and some shit like that. I need to be able to holler at him, man. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, I'll do it. I'll reach out.
But
he's not that hard to find, because he's. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's almost 6 a.m. here, so I gotta motivate.
Well, do what you gotta do, kid.
Yo, man.
Wait a minute, Saturday. It's the weekend over there, isn't it?
Yeah, man. But I'm a 6-day-a-week player, man.
Oh, right. Friday was your day of rest.
No, they changed it here, man. It's now.
No. I know what you mean. I know what you mean because I remember back in the day, the weekends was Thursday and Friday, but then they switched it to Friday and Saturdays.
Yeah. So, man. But peace, Sean. Like I said, yo, GG, keep up the content, man.
Hey, man, I'm trying to, man. I got hot early today, man, because you had some pink toe motherfucker in here trying to tell me what to fucking say and how I'm supposed to think. What my orientation politically and morally is supposed to be. I don't play them type of games with them motherfuckers, bro.
Damn, man.
But I'm going to keep the content up, dog. Straight up. Rude, dog.
Hoorah.
Gotta go.
Wolf.
Hey, we'll talk later, Smoke. Peace.
But yeah, so, all I'm saying is, and here's the last thing I'm going to cover before I get off of here, man. And really, for real, I would have ended this a minute ago, but I'm glad Sanddog and you came on here. But, I mean, ultimately, man, and I know people in the manosphere don't like to talk about this shit because they just want to talk about bitches endlessly.
There's a lot of uncomfortable discussions that need to be had, but unfortunately, some people just don't have the right mindset, the will, or whatever,
But the last point I want to make is that African Americans and other people of color have the same racial biases against African Americans that white people have.
True.
These are the facts, man.
I can vouch for that. I mean, because I'm not ADOS. I'm African, but I'm not ADOS. So I've heard many of my ilk when they speak about African Americans and whatnot. So I'm like, I understand. I get it. But I've been around African Americans since I was a baby. So I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't go out in their face like, what do you mean? I just have to be, because in my culture, I gotta be on code within my culture. So I asked them, what do you mean? What are you talking about?
But I
And
mean,
some
you
people,
know, yeah, I get it.
Go
I
ahead.
get it, bro. But like in this article, it basically says like over 4 decades of research, it opens up and reveals or uncovers that both whites and African Americans unconsciously associate black people with negative values and white people with positive values. That is to say, African Americans often have negative attitudes about other African Americans, and they love the shit out of white people's draws.
You see this
Say-
also. No, facts. You see this. You can see this not just among ADOS. You see this in other among other black communities as well.
Then it says both whites and African Americans generally hold negative stereotypes of other black people, including stereotypes of black people as criminally inclined, violent, and dangerous.
I've had to deal with that a few times. Fortunately, I was able, because of the way I carry myself, the way I talk to people. I'm very disarming, so I've been able to keep that down to a minimum where I'm at. So I understand that misconception. Yeah, even in my case, it's even worse. Because on top of that, they also say that we bring diseases as well, HIV in particular.
Oh, for sure. You know,
You
so
understand?
I mean, but it's been so many. It's over 4 decades of this shit. So
I'm not surprised.
in the end, they say at least implicitly, black police officers probably feel just as unsafe around average black young men in the inner city as do white police officers. Meaning you see your own people as as dangerous and criminals.
You see that anxiety. That anxiety comes from it. Then again, you have to ask this question. I'm not familiar. I'm not sure if you're familiar with a YouTuber slash comedian named Jimmy Dores.
Never heard of him.
Jimmy Dore used to be with the Young Turks, but he left because he was like kind of because of what they were, and he grew up in Chicago.
Yeah.
He comes from a family, and the guys in the neighborhood he grew up in were mostly people in law enforcement, fire department, whatnot, and he understood the mindset of most people who join law enforcement. Some of them have some sort of inferiority complex, or who have been abused or something like that. And now once they gain that sense of power, they want to just, throw their weight around, so to speak. And it's
So
even
ultimately,
encouraged. That kind of that mindset is encouraged.
right.
Go ahead.
So at the end of the day, what I don't want to do is drag this out any further than what it is. Like I'm already at 2 hours and 40 minutes. But the point is, like there are studies that demonstrate that white and non-white officers don't have any difference in racial bias on shooting.
Absolutely.
Like when they do like tests of response time, like how quickly will you shoot a black versus a white target, right? Or with respect to stereotype mistakes. Like shooting a black person without a weapon or one with one. So the same biases that white people have are the same biases that black people have if they're police officers or not. So this is the reason why if you see black people getting treated like niggas by other niggas, this is the reason why. Because we perceive each other as niggas. It is what it is. Now, I mean, I just, look, it ain't gonna change until the mentality of black people change, which means that like the indoctrination and the enculturation of young black babies. But how can that even fucking change when we don't have control over the educational system or our own families?
That's what Malcolm X was trying to explain when he talked about the whole importance of education over legislation. And when he talked about how media plays in shaping the minds and the narratives of people. And somebody was paying attention because they've been forcing certain types of narratives.
So, like, when women think about who they should marry and who they should fuck with, let me say this. Let me go. Women are worried about material bullshit and whether or not they can get Gucci bags and bullshit like this and who gonna be the boss of the house. What you need to be worried about is that your kid don't answer questions like this.
is the black doll? And which one is the white doll?
That one.
Which doll is the pretty doll? Which doll is the nice doll? Which doll is the bad doll?
When you trying to get a mate, you need to be worried about what the fuck kind of mentality your kid gonna have, which is gonna create a legacy, as opposed to who gonna be the fucking boss of the house, who gonna do the majority of the fucking housework and all this other extra bullshit. But right now, all we worried about is superficial bullshit. When the mentality and the psychology of the kids, it don't even fucking factor in.
Let alone the influence you will have on over that child. Because where do they get those mindset? Who convinces them of that? Where are they getting that from?
I'm not just gonna say it's women that inculcate
The
their
social
children. I'm not just gonna say it's women, but I'm gonna say the society writ large. But I'm saying women ain't fucking helping it out.
Look at me. I mean, our man, Mr. Z, when he talks about the whole issue of commercialization and whatnot, and how it's been targeting the younger generations, going back to us millennials and whatnot, and late 70s Gen Xers and whatnot, how they were targeting children with certain ads and whatnot, and how that messed with their mindset of self and how it affected their self-esteem.
What people need to be worried about when they couple up with other people and have children is the mentality, whether or not their children will have a healthy psyche.
Exactly.
And how they will be educated such that they can function, flourish, and thrive and have a healthy self-image, which will enable them to conquer or basically overcome any obstacles that's placed in front of them. But I don't hear motherfuckers talking about no shit like that when they having like decisions about what kind of partners they gonna have. I don't hear motherfuckers saying nothing about that.
My thing is, and I'm glad my father,
bro.
I'm sorry, if I may.
If anybody in the chat can tell me when they've heard a conversation like that being had related to the partners that they gonna have and what the future of their fucking legacy is gonna be, I'm here to listen. I want to hear it.
I can say, like, especially like from an immigrant's perspective, like they always say, we came here so you can get an education. But how many parents, let alone ADO's parents, are concerned with what their children are being taught in the school system? Anybody ever question what's going on in those school systems or whatnot? I have an uncle, sorry. When his oldest son, my cousin, was going to the high school that we all went to, he looked at the system, he said, I don't like this. So he took him out of there, he sent him to another school for a reason. And because of that, this young man has learned to be an upstanding man. Although he's very conservative, he's learned to be a stand-up man and do for himself. He even went so far as to relocate to another country and try to start from scratch where he's at. Not commend him for that. He and I still talk to this very day. That's my blood. He means a lot to me. His family, my family, my uncles, everything. I love what they are, but there are times when I don't agree, where I agree with them or disagree with them. But I'm thankful to my own father for that, my own mother for that, because they made sure they taught me, like, listen, you got to learn how to think for yourself. Be yourself. Unfortunately, in our own society, you cannot stand out because the whole view is the nail that sticks, like the old Japanese saying, the nail that sticks out will get hammered back in. So they said, listen, you got to go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. Unfortunately, because you were born in exile, you have a different mindset than your local brethren. So you got to fit in where you can fit in, but understand the challenges you're going to face when you go over there. And I already knew what the challenges I was going to face when I get over there. So I understand the issue of self-esteem and whatnot. I mean, come on. You go to Africa, you got people using skin lightening creams. Skin lightening creams.
Oh, that shit happening all over Africa.
Oh man. And I come from and me, where I come from, my ethnicity and everything, we're naturally lighter in complexion than most people because our phenotypes are unique. So I'm like, what are you doing? I am.
All I can say is, hey man, you the self-hate. I started it
Uh-huh.
off with the self-hate.
Yeah, it's a self-hate.
But black folks, man,
They need to help themselves.
until we can begin to try to educate the minds of the youth, man, for them to love themselves
Mm-hmm.
and to think that, they're beautiful and that they're worthy of admiration and respect. Until that time, man, it doesn't matter, you're not going to change it. Even black people, they'll carry out the same functions as white folks.
Dysfunction. They're going to carry out the same dysfunction.
So, that this is the reason why diversity by itself, and here's another fact before I burn
That's
out
tokenism. At its base, it's tokenism. Sorry. Go ahead.
Check it out. Evidence shows that police departments with more black officers engage in more racial profiling than those with fewer black officers.
I wonder why.
Look, and this is an indictment of New Orleans, right? Consistent with that, the Department of Justice uncovered extensive racial bias in the predominantly black New Orleans Police Department. According to the Department of Justice, police officers in New Orleans failed to articulate sufficient facts to justify stops, searches, and arrests. So these are niggas with God complexes. Finally, data indicates that black officers are just as likely as their white colleagues to form non-behavioral suspicions about black suspects, and that black officers who stop a black man are more likely to arrest him than they are to arrest a stopped white suspect. So this is black men doing it to themselves. This is what this shit is. And I'm not here to just point out the good shit or to say black men are innocent. If there's a problem with black men, it needs to be discussed. But the only thing, I went off on that white dude, man, or whoever the fuck he was. He shouldn't have been up in my shit disrespectful. So, I went off track and went off on the dude. But
wait, don't you have moderators on your chat?
Yeah, no, I got some moderators out there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because they should have
been bounced from the jump. But it is what it is, man. You know what I'm saying? Motherfuckers ain't always on the job. I can't be on the job all the time 100%. And I got a bot. You know what I'm saying? But at the end, black people have implicit bias of other black folks. You know what I'm saying? So
that goes back to tribalism when you think about it. That goes back to African tribalism when you think about it.
And in the last section they talk about, but the last thing I want to say is, they say there's self-threats. Okay, and these self-threats can create conditions that increase the likelihood of officers, including black officers, aggressively targeting black civilians. Both of us have elsewhere laid out the main perceived threats that cause officers to over-police black men. The analysis here draws on those frameworks and applies portions of them to black police officers to illuminate how they too are susceptible to these self-threats. Here are the four main threats: social dominance threat, stereotype threat, masculinity threat, and racial solidarity threat. Okay, number one, the social dominance threat. For more than 20 years, social psychologists have been developing and providing empirical support for what they call social dominance theory. The basic idea is that the persistence of social inequality derives in part from people's endorsement of hierarchy promoting ideologies that effectively lock in extant advantages and disadvantages. Under the theory, people who endorse such ideologies are said to have social dominance orientation. Okay? Although scholars typically describe social dominance orientation as an individual difference variable, empirical evidence suggests that it's also a group-based phenomenon. In other words, where one is located in a particular social hierarchy partly determines one's SDO. Members of high status groups have a stronger SDO than members of lower status groups. For example, men tend to have a higher SDO than women. While whites evidence a higher SDO than blacks or Latinos, similarly, police officers have a stronger SDO than civilians. They believe that they're on a fucking higher hierarchy. It just is what it is, okay? Even after controlling for a range of other characteristics, and this is Jim Sedanius' work, okay? Social, in which Jim Sedanius is often used or referred to in this space, okay?
Okay.
I'm gonna skip past that because I want to move on to another thing, right?
Go right ahead.
Hold on, let me go to, because they developed this more and more, but I don't know.
Social dominant. I mean, look at it that way. When
Stereotype threat, right?
Stereotype threat? Okay.
Stereotype threat is another threat that can impact how black police officers police other African Americans. Excuse me, I butchered that sentence. Another threat that can impact how black police officers police other African Americans relates to stereotype threat. Stereotype threat refers to the anxiety that occurs when people are concerned about confirming a negative stereotype about a social group they value and to which they belong. People can experience stereotype threat even when they do not endorse the stereotype or believe it applies to them. All that is required is that individuals are aware of the negative stereotype and are in a situation that raises concerns that they will be judged in terms of that stereotype. Across a number of studies, researchers have learned that police officers experience stereotype threat arising from the concern that they will be perceived as racist by the civilians they encounter. Disturbingly, these concerns can result in racial violence. Studies demonstrate that the more officers experience stereotype threat, the more they are likely to use greater force against black suspects relative to individuals of other racial groups in both the lab and the real world. Okay? So black people suffer from this, they say. The finding is particularly problematic for African Americans because the police are racist negative stereotype is most salient with reference to black civilians. African Americans are more likely than any other group to generate stereotype threat in police officers, including officers who are black.
Oh, wow.
Let me keep pushing though. I want to get to the third one and the fourth one.
Go ahead.
This is some long, but I mean, this shit is. Hold on, I didn't get to the third one. Where is the third one?
Go on, Gigi, you're cooking.
I'm trying to get to the third one, bro. All I saw was the.
Well, in the meantime, if I may,
hold on. Masculinity threat. Masculinity threat refers to the fear of being perceived as insufficiently masculine, a bitch ass nigga. A beta. Masculinity theorists have rejected the notion of gender as being simply about biological differences between sexes, focusing instead on gender as a social construct. Viewed in this way, gender is not about one's innate characteristics, but rather about performing social expectations of what it means to be a man. To put all of this another way, one must learn to be a man in this society because manhood is a socially produced category. I don't know if I agree with all that shit, but manhood is performance, a script. It is accomplished and reenacted in everyday relationships, precisely because men do not perceive of their manhood or masculinity as a developmental guarantee, but as a status that has to be earned. Men often experience a kind of masculinity precarity, or what we have been calling masculinity threat. So if you feel like you soft or other people feel like you might be soft, then you'll go out of your way to demonstrate that you are alpha or that you are a man. And how do you do that? More than likely you do so by committing acts of violence.
Oh, Napoleonic complex or inferiority complex of sorts.
Right.
That, so that sense of inadequacy. Because I understand that when you're in certain situations, people are going to constantly test you. But so unfortunately, some people are so paranoid about it that they'll go above and beyond to prove themselves. And I've had. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Lastly, I want to talk about, and I'm about to wrap this up. And thank you for the people who hit the Cash App up, man. Appreciate that. Expansion Wiring Technologies just hit me up with a $5. Another brother hit me up with a $3.50 one. Chris G and Quincy Brewington hit me up with one earlier, man. I appreciate that, man. Straight up. And yes, the Cash App does work. It does work. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, support from the Cash App is tax-free, and it helps me to pay the rent. Just letting you know. Anyway, so the racial solidarity threat is the threat of being perceived as a sellout. Right?
Oh, yeah.
So the notion is that black police interactions with black men potentially threaten these officers' sense of racial identity and kinship. More precisely, the threat is that the black men with whom they interact will perceive black police officers to be sellouts or Uncle Toms or people who disidentify or disassociate from other blacks. So then again, so they're saying this could engender aggressive policing, right? And could expect the black. Go ahead.
I mean, when you think about it, some people are gonna. Black officers have to understand that even when you're trying to do the right thing and you're trying to stop motherfuckers from committing crimes, they're always going to be trying to go. They're always going to go below the belt and accuse you of being a traitor or Uncle Tom. How the fuck? I mean, if you're upholding the law, and a black suspect and a black man who is a suspect you catch him committing a crime. How the fuck are you the Uncle Tom when you're preventing crime? Especially if that person committed a crime to another black person.
Bro, look, we need police officers. We need black police officers. We need, you know, whatever. Not saying we don't need police officers, especially in America, I guess. But I mean, you know, the only thing we've been talking about is, look, you can be a police officer, cool, fine. But it ain't cool to go killing motherfuckers over goddamn traffic arrests. I'm sorry. That's some bullshit to me.
Fair enough.
And 4 or 5 motherfuckers punching the motherfucker in his gut and slapping him upside the head with billy clubs when you outnumber him 4-1 or 5-1 is some bullshit to me. It's unnecessary. I understand you want to demonstrate that you a man and you part of the force and you'll uphold the code of the blue or whatever, what have you. But bruh.
And wait, are we allowed to cuss?
Bitch made shit. It's some whole ass nigga shit, some bitch made shit to fuck up a dude, man, for a traffic stop and to leave him fucking dead.
Yeah, motherfuckers just like
at a break to me, man. I'm just
a lot
keeping
of
it a
shit,
buck.
some bitch shit. No, we're keeping it a buck. There's some bitch shit out here, but then again, there's to play devil's advocate. On the flip side, there's a lot of bitch ass shit going on, and motherfuckers can just go off.
Hey man, it's levels.
But
to
it is
crime.
what it is. But I hear what you're saying.
It's levels to crime. If a motherfucker pointing a gun at you, okay, boom, bang his ass. I can even see if you mistook the motherfucker had a gun and you popped him. At least it's an explanation. But fuck,
he was reaching.
A traffic man, you got this motherfucker. You standing him up, steadily body blowing him like this motherfucker on a punch out video game or something. Y'all taking turns hazing the motherfucker or something, man. That's bullshit, bro.
Man, I remember, was it a clip I remember seeing was in South Africa. White cops subjugating black suspects to abuse at the hands of other police dogs. And anytime anytime these civilians try to fight back, these white officers would just reprimand them with billy clubs and whatnot. So, yeah.
So at the end of the day, man, look, I don't have a problem with people being punished or people being arrested. But, like in this country, we already know the primary reason that black people get arrested in America is for drug crimes, nonviolent drug crimes. That's where the majority of the arrests come from.
If A.L.
Non-violent
Evans
drug
was
crimes.
here, if A.L. Evans is here, and I'm not gonna try to do his accent, but he would break it down like, man, that's that school to prison pipeline we've been talking about for years, man. Just
And
people don't want to admit it.
Bruh, if drugs were legal, half of the ways that niggas make money illegally wouldn't exist. Like what crime would exist?
I mean,
other than robbing motherfuckers for their purses or some shit like that. It wouldn't exist. Definitely selling drugs would not be a factor.
In fact, you put a lot of people out of bit. If you legalize a lot of drugs, a lot of those dudes wouldn't want. The problem is like, you know, the problem is like if you made it legitimate businesses. How many black owned institutions are there?
Bro,
how many of those guys could be able to go legit?
Don't matter if they're able to go legit or not. Like in my view, look, most of the crime comes from poverty to begin with. First of all, if you created a jobs program, or like they said in the text here, a Marshall program, where black people actually had access to resources. See, America gave Europe a Marshall Plan, which is basically resources to build up their shit after the war.
That's true.
But they never gave Negroes a goddamn thing. And in fact, they did all they could to basically disenfranchise us and make sure that we didn't have a leg up, because we can't be the equivalent of them. We're not part of the social body related to them. Now that's them. That's something they gotta live with. But the more they do it, the more they increase their own misery, because like motherfucker said, a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. If you try to throw salt on us, that salt gonna spill over on your feet just like it's spilling on ours. You're creating the same mechanisms for the police to be utilized against your own group, your own demographic at some point. So, you know, so at the end, but all I'm saying is most of the arrests and most of the crime in this country centered, especially in the black community, is centered around drug business.
94 crime bill. How about go back to the 80s, war on drugs and everything. Or is it 70s, excuse me?
60s.
The 60s? That's how far back to the war on drugs? All right.
So I understand, you know, motherfuckers don't want to see junkies everywhere or whatever the case may be, but dude, do we have a lack of junkies? Is there a diminution in the size of junkies and shit?
Man, I could give you an example. Check out Denmark at one time. The area, or in Switzerland, I remember there was a park they told me in one city in Switzerland, I think it was in Geneva. White heroin users. And the place was littered with syringe needles left, right, and center. The city decided that, all right, we got to clean up this place and put an end to that stuff. Or like what's going on like in Vancouver. Why do you think they have those like they have those like facilities where junkies can safely shoot up and everything like that? Because they don't want them going out in the streets, leaving syringes all over the place. They're trying to do something like they try to do set up a clinic like that, I think in Ontario, but who knows?
But I mean, look, it's junkies anywhere. Man, you know how many junkies I know, man?
Should I even bother to ask?
Bro, junkie motherfuckers putting dog food in their fucking veins. Bro,
what?
Come on, man.
No. Whoa. All right. That's just too much for me to handle.
Bruh, motherfuckers is junkies out here, bro. Motherfuckers doing heroin the whole nine. Shoot, like that shit ain't new. I knew a motherfucker, his fucking left arm looked like his forearm looked like Popeye. And, you know, his left hand was swollen like a motherfucker. Like he just took his finger, his thumb, and blew into it and blew his fucking hand up. Doing heroin, man.
I know somebody who's an ex-heroin addict. We've had talks about that.
This shit
And
ain't, it ain't for me
no,
to judge.
the
It
thing
ain't for me
about
to
it is,
judge. It's
no,
not
no,
for
I
me to
understand.
judge, bro.
No, I'm not trying to say that. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying, I know someone who's a former junkie. She's been off that stuff for several years now. But you see it in her face, the wear and tear, because that shit ages you quick. You ever seen what happened to most people after a couple years on that stuff?
Man, I know
And it's a
motherfucking
white
her,
person we're talking about. So
bro.
I'm like, I've had
I
talks
know.
with them about it, and
I
that
done
we
seen I done seen young boys, man, doing heroin and still look young as a motherfucker. I'm just keeping it real.
wait, what type of shit are they on?
Man, they snort. We call it snorting buttons in motherfucking St. Louis. Now I ain't never. I don't fuck with dope like that. The only thing I've ever done is beer, hard alcohol, and some motherfucking marijuana. That's as far as I go. That's as far as I will go. No further than that ever in life.
Anybody's ever seen the comedy special "I Might Need Security" by Jamie Foxx, where he talks about black men, we smoke weed and we drink and we just consume alcohol. But he also talked about his misadventures with ecstasy. But then again, no.
But what's the drug that kills more people per year than all the others combined?
Heroin.
No.
Methamphetamines.
No, sir.
Alcohol.
There you go.
Alcoholism.
Alcohol kills more motherfuckers per year than all the other drugs combined. Kills more people per year than every other drug combined.
Thank you, Robin Williams, for explaining the dangers of alcoholism. That's all I'm going to say about it. So, this is why I'm grateful I don't drink. But anyway, I guess we got to wrap this up. Anyway, you got to be somewhere, I'm sure.
Yeah, man. It's 8 o'clock on Friday, man. Hey, man, hit the Cash App up, man. Know what I'm saying? Support the Green Gorilla channel if you can, man. I got some bills to pay, man.
Oh, you know what? You just gonna be you're gonna probably play that Johnny Kemp joint right now. You know, Friday just got paid and everything.
Got paid? No, I ain't got paid, man. Shit.
No, but you know what I'm saying. What I'm saying?
Yeah, I know. But I'll holler at you later, Wolf, man. I'm gonna close it out.
Hey, you have a good evening. You stay safe, brother. Good weekend.
Yes, sir. The only thing I want to do is have a conversation about this. I haven't seen the videos. I'm pretty sure they're out right now. And everybody can see, people have been commenting. We had at least one guy who came in and wanted to say some slick shit about moral responsibility. I wanted to curse. I wanted to slap the shit out of that white boy, man. Real talk, man. I wanted to hurt that dude, man, real bad, bro. Don't come into my show talking that bullshit, bro. Trying to humiliate us. Fuck that shit. I'm not for that bullshit, bro. What he had, asshole, shout out to him, man. He say, taking a dab to this, G. Check out my dab. Check out my dab. This boy hitting the dab. Look at my dab. I think that's the Migos song where they used to look at my dad. But yeah, man, all I wanted to do is just point out that diversity by itself, tokens without having the appropriate cultural encodation and indoctrination is not going to help black folks, man. Putting Negroes in spaces where white people are, in and of itself, is not gonna, do the work. It's not gonna change the conditions. There's a lot of factors and features of black existence that need to be resolved. And societal, problems that have to be resolved before we can actually be made whole and actually perform functions for ourselves without, basically reinforcing, the savagery of white folks. So there you have it, man. I'll holler at y'all on the next one, man. I don't know if I'm coming on tomorrow or not. I might, though. We'll see. But I'll holler at y'all till the next one, bro. Peace.